And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Danny Cannell. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson. Big week here on the show. Big week at CBS Sports in general. On the college football side, Coach Rankings Week. Every single offseason, we sit down and we rank all of the Power 5 coaches 1 through 65. Now, thankfully, with Lance Leipold being hired at Kansas, you can hear any of the 45 minutes of Kansas football discussion that we've dropped on the podcast in the last month or so. Just go check it out in the feed. With that said, we are able to rank all of them. The ballots were sent out to members of CBSSports.com 24/7 Sports. The story is going to be compiled by Tom. And while the rankings will drop on Tuesday and Wednesday on CBSSports.com, today we wanted to give you a little tease, a little bit of a preview, a discussion of how we rank coaches. And then Tom, who has seen them, and he sent me an email. Tom, I have not opened it. I want to have this be like a true surprise when they do drop. And for our discussions, I didn't want to have any of that information locked and loaded. But Tom has the rankings as he continues to prepare that story and his mentions for everybody who is upset that their coach was or wasn't ranked at a certain spot. So I wanted to kick off this discussion with the idea of how do you rank coaches? Because it's great that it's entirely subjective. You know, everybody's got their own value system. Everybody's got their own accomplishments that they put weight on. Sometimes it's more intangible. And over time, you know, these coaches that have been around in multiple stops for multiple decades, even, you kind of see stocks rise and fall. I pulled up my own ballot before we got into this conversation, so I could at least go back and remember how I ranked coaches for this exercise. And just because like one coach is at, for example, 21 and another coach is down at 40, I kind of think those coaches are the same, but we've got to slot them. And sometimes splitting those hairs and doing those tiebreakers is really, really tough. So in general, if you could sort of formulate an explanation or at least a starting point for how you go about these kinds of exercises, how do you rank coaches?
Well, I start at Nick Saban.
Yes.
And then I go with Dabo Swinney. And then I go from there. That is how I rank coaches. I don't know. It's a difficult thing to figure out because like there are so many different ways. And I think really everybody that does it is probably doing an amalgamation of every single way and just kind of personal preference, because like if you approach it from a sense of, well, I just rank them based on who I would hire, I think that's a good starting point. But I also think that doesn't take considerations, because maybe then a 35-year-old wonderkind who hasn't really accomplished much but looks promising suddenly becomes, moves up ahead of a more established coach who's more proven. And I think that if you're trying to rank like coaches who, as far as what they've accomplished, then that kind of pushes more accomplished guys further down than they probably should be. And it probably pushes some younger guys with more potential up higher than it should be. So I try to take an approach of saying, okay, Nick Saban is at Alabama to win national titles. This coach is at, mid-tier Power 5 school to develop players, get up to the NFL, and get to bowl games. And I try to see like what their objective is, and then somehow I just try to figure out in my mind who's better at accomplishing their objective.
I think that's a really important split though, right? Because, if at a certain point, if you're just ranking accomplishments, there's sort of a baseline that, like Mark Richt, right, is always going to have better results at Georgia than Bill Snyder did at Kansas State, for example. But Bill Snyder wasn't trying to win national championships at Kansas State. And putting my list together, I just looking at the list I submitted, I felt really good about like my top 13 or 14. And I also felt pretty damn good about like my bottom 8 or 9 here.
Do you go inexperience? Does that, because remember, this is a Power 5 coach ranking, and almost like we talk about with NFL draft. If you are being ranked on an NFL draft board, you are awesome at football. Like if you are being considered to be a professional football player, you are good. If you have made it to the level of being a Power 5 coach, you have done something to inspire confidence at some point in your career that you are worthy of not one of the 65 best jobs, but for the most part, the better jobs at the FBS level. And so I know for me, the bottom sort of becomes a lot of the new arrivals.
Especially the new arrivals who were hired, and the rationale for it was our boosters loved him when he was an assistant here, even though he's never been a coordinator or a head coach anywhere. Like granted, Dabo wasn't either, and he worked out great, but like there's some examples like that this year where I'm not going to give them the benefit of the doubt necessarily, especially if they don't have that track record, from before. But I think Tom just nailed it. You have guys with really different objectives. They're not. I'm not going to say they're not playing the same sport, but they're playing for a different prize. And so I do give the tie break to the guys who are having to to play at that highest level. It's always well, hey, if you took Jim Grove away from Wake Forest and you put him at Miami, would he win a national title? Based on how he does with limited resources, sure. But recruiting at that level is a whole different ballgame. And that's a separate skill to have. And I think one that you have to measure coaches on too.
I think this is such an interesting discussion too, because it's very easy to go to the resumes and be like, well, Nick Saban's the best, right? It's hard to argue against that. How do you argue against him or Dabo or Lincoln or any of the coaches that are having success right now? But if you give me a guy like Pat Fitzgerald, who's had as much success as he's had at Northwestern, consistent success at a place with significantly different resources. Now they have nice facilities now, but different challenges as far as recruiting goes, like less talent on the roster. Like find me a coach that maximizes more. And isn't that what being a great coach is about, is maximizing the talent you're given? So I think it's a very interesting discussion to have. And then it comes into because there are different styles of coaches. Some are CEO types and they build a program and then they delegate. I mean, that's what I played for at Bobby Bowden, who I would consider one of the best coaches of all time. There are other coaches who are extremely hands-on and want to be in on everything, want to micromanage, and I see Saban out there coaching technique still during camp, working with some of the secondary players. So I think it is an interesting dynamic. I personally, I think I've said this before on here, always kind of give more, and I want to give more credit to the guys like Pat Fitzgerald, like a David Shaw, like a David Cutcliffe, who's under he's had a rough patch here at Duke, but has done a pretty good job winning there at a program where traditionally they don't. So I think it's like, how do you balance those things together? Which is why I think Matt Campbell is kind of in a sweet spot at Iowa State, because it's not perceived as a powerhouse program, and yet you don't have no chance either. So it's like, that's probably like the sweet spot of where you want to be, where you could really kind of have the boast of both worlds. You're perceived as a great coach because you're dealing with less talent, except you still have pretty good talent.
So, go ahead.
No, well, the only real pushback I would have on what Danny said, I think he made a really good point, is that it's not just what you do with the talent you get, it's also the talent you get. Because unlike in the NFL, your job is also to get that talent in. So, I mean, there are some schools that you could put the best recruiter in the country there, and they're still not going to move up that much because of the limitations. But I think you do have to include recruiting prowess and running a recruiting organization as part of your formula here, right? Because otherwise, I mean,
I didn't. Like you would not like my ballot because.
So like you have Dan Mullen as like a top 4 coach then?
No, but I have, like he just mentioned Fitzgerald, and we do this every year. Because we do it every year, it does lead to some wild fluctuations. It's like the guys that have to do 11 mock drafts or power rankings every single week. You just kind of have some reactions. I got Fitzgerald at number 6. And I think that right now he is peaking. Like if we just look at where he's got that program, the success that they've had, getting to the Big Ten title game in the last couple of years, like, yeah, I'm soaring on him. David Shaw, like as a whole, like that would be David Shaw might be somebody that I'd be more interested in hiring than I've got him in my rankings. I've got David Shaw down at 51. I think his stock is falling, and just kind of the read and react. But the fact that I'm high on guys like Dave Clawson, Bronco Mendenhall, I've got Kirby Smart down at 17. Kirby Smart's not 17 if we really put recruiting into the forefront.
Right. But that is part of the job.
Right. I'm just saying, like, this is the difference in like how much you weigh in all the different buckets along the way is that, I'm I've got like a Tom Allen ahead of Ed Ogeron.
Let me ask you guys this then. How much weight do you put on, like, would you want to hire them right now or historical achievements? Because there are certain guys who, have been really good coaches for a long time who are, look, maybe not on the, on the final lap, but they're not peaking right now. They're sort of just, maintaining or slightly downgraded. What did you do with that? Like, did you guys look at it as, hey, I want to hire these guys right now?
No. But like Mac Brown, I'm basing him on what he did at North Carolina to like turn things from Larry Fedora and get it moving back in the right direction. He's getting credit for that. And I'm not ignoring the national championship, but it's not part of my thinking. I'm thinking about him right now.
See, there's probably more weight on how things are currently for the coach, but I take the whole thing into account more because I don't think, like, even if, a coach with like multiple conference titles, but he hasn't won one in 5 years. Well, he's still won multiple conference titles, which is more than a lot of the other coaches say. So I think that accomplishments have to matter. That said, it's not if you're coming off of 3 losing seasons, those conference titles from 5 years ago mean a lot less to me than they probably would have 5 years ago. And at the same time, I use it more kind of like in a tiebreaker sense, because like we've talked about, like with ranking teams and these coaches, you get past a certain point and you're really just splitting hairs with it. So for me, I think that's where that kind of stuff comes into play more. It's like if I'm looking at 35 versus 36, I'm trying to say, oh, is this coach better than this one? Like, well, this one's got multiple conference titles. This one doesn't. So I'll put this guy ahead of him.
What about you, Danny? Are you big? Are you like, where are you right now? Stock price at the moment, or are you looking at everything?
No, because I try to take in the whole body of work. Like, to me, if I'm judging Mac Brown, I would judge his success at Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would, and his first stint at North Carolina. I think you look at now, the sad thing about the state of coaching right now is that, like, we were talking about, a team 3 years, 500, or like, probably not lasting at a lot of these programs. Like, so that might cost you your job, even if you did have an incredible run of success before that. So I try to look at the whole body of work. The other thing I learned, that even a top 15 ranking in this list, when it comes out, is no guarantee of future employment. I was just looking at Tom Herman, who was 15th, I believe, on last year's preseason. Like, hey, this discussion right now, and now not even in college football anymore. It's kind of crazy.
Les Miles was the tough one last year. Do you take the success that Les Miles had at LSU and do you allow it to boost his stock as Kansas's coach in these rankings heading into the 2020 season?
I think it did prove what a lot of people thought of Les Miles and why LSU eventually got rid of him, was that he wasn't maximizing the talent that was given him. And then all of a sudden you give him less talent and it's like, then it's like this big reveal of what Les Miles, the coach, really is. Is that fair or unfair?
Fair.
I think
there's also,
fair.
What also comes into play in this, and it absolutely should not, but it probably has to do with recruiting, is likability. Like, it's so like, it's a personality matters. Not one of us, and I'd be curious to know where you guys have a guy like Dave Dorn, who's done a fantastic job at NC State, but because he's kind of boring and doesn't give you a lot of great quotes, he never comes up in a lot of conversations. Now, I'm not making the case for Dave Dorn to be a top 10 coach, but he's a really good football coach.
Yeah, he's
top
really
half.
Good. I've got it 35, like right there in that middle pack of like 10 to
Just
15 coaches.
Average dude. Like,
yeah,
that's
look,
you.
That's good. That is a good thing. Like, if you can be like a middle of the pack Power 5 coach for 10 years at a Power 5 program, you're doing something right.
I think I factor in recency more. Just looking at my list, like I had Dave Doran over Dave Cutcliffe.
Yeah, same.
Like,
and that was
who's a better coach right now in my mind? If I had to go make a hire today, I'm not hiring Cutcliffe over him. Like what do you do with Schiano?
Oh, way low.
First time at Rutgers, really good. Been out of the college game for a while. Like that was a tough one for me. I didn't have him bottom 10, but
I've got Schiano hanging out near Scott Frost, whose stock has been plummeting.
Oof.
I mean,
Wow. That's tough too. Like what he did at UCF, that was a pretty incredible run, but man, it's
awesome. Tom and I normally bump heads on some of these. Like I I've got Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day in my top 5. There's nothing about their, like, they do not have the track record or the resume. You know, it's just been like such a small sample size. I am overreacting to that small sample size based on the success. I know that they were 16-year-olds that got a brand new Cadillac from their parents, but you know what? They haven't totaled it. Okay. And in fact, they're doing pretty good at keeping it between the yellow and the white. And so I've got a good feeling about not only what we've seen so far, but also with the trajectory, maybe with some of these small sample size recent hires. I guess maybe I'm buying into the hype on that one. I mean, Tom, are you still like on the lower side for a Ryan Day or a Lincoln Riley? Okay.
No, they're both up there now for me too, because the only reason I was holding out on him was, well, I can't remember where I had Riley last year, but he was up in that spot last year. Day was the one I was still lower on than everybody else. But my thought was just, okay, you inherited the program from Urban Meyer. I need to see you actually run it for a little bit before I'm just going to assume you're a great coach because you're at Ohio State and you have a great team. He's had 2 consecutive playoff berths, nearly beat Clemson in his first one, crushed Clemson in the second one, got to the title game. Okay, you've been maintaining it. I'm bumping your ranking up.
Now, honestly, the recruiting has been even better.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, like I think that's fair to look at these guys who inherited and say, wait, how sure are we that they're not a Larry Coker?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I feel
Coker proof in my rankings,
sure.
so that way I could look back and be like, see, I wasn't jumping the gun like you idiots.
Well, Riley and Ryan Day also are the offensive whiz kids, right? Because they're coming in there and it's what's in vogue, and they're getting offenses that are going to like be among the best in the country. All of those things are going to be probably taken into consideration. Is there any, so in just a little bit, Tom, again, the only one on this podcast who has actually seen the final rankings. Tom has 5 coaches that he thinks are going to be very interesting. We're going to discuss the 5 coaches. We don't know what their final ranking is going to be. We're going to do that here in just a little bit. But is there, before we tackle some headlines from over the weekend and late last week, is there any one coach like Bud that you would add that you're a little bit curious that you want to, you're going to be interested to see where they land on the final rankings?
Sure. Scott Satterfield. What was a tough one for me to rank. Honestly, like for me, I could have taken 30 to 45 and thrown them in a randomizer and been just as happy with my results as the results actually had. Like, I don't really, I mean, like Pat Narduzzi or Paul Christ, right? Like different situations. One is kind of set up by Barry Alvarez with that program. Basically everybody who goes in there and follows the blueprint does well. Gary Anderson didn't follow the blueprint and, left. There, like, where do you put like Chip Kelly?
I can't tell Scott. I can't tell a Louisville fan when a Louisville fan is mad when I say that I had Scott Satterfield at number 36 on my ballot. They'd be like, "Are there 35 better coaches than Scott Satterfield in the Power 5?" No, but there's probably like 22 better coaches than Scott Satterfield. They just happen to be T23, and this ain't a golf tournament where everybody gets paid out for like what your like tied number is. And Scott Satterfield, in terms of my own personal opinions, even higher. Like I was listening, they didn't have a spring game, and I had to do a bunch of like ACC spring storylines. And basically the only thing I had to like go off of was a press conference that he had after their 15th practice. And I loved listening to him talk about his team. I thought he was very honest. He gave like a good analysis. He described what they, what they're going to want to do, what they're expecting from different players in their running back rooms, where some of their shortcomings are. It was a very honest assessment of where that Louisville football team was. And I really appreciated it as somebody who covers the sport. But I imagine if I'm a fan, I appreciate that too. Scott Satterfield, my own personal rankings would be much higher, but we're also, comparing him against, multiple years and long stretches of Power 5 experience, conference championships at the Power 5 level. Like it gets really difficult right there in that middle portion of the rankings for sure.
I will say, well, I will not reveal where he is ranked. He is in that 30 to 45 range, bud.
Same. Yeah. This is going to be fascinating. I also think that if we did this as a tiered ranking thing, I think we could actually even have a little bit more clarity. I don't know that ordinal ranks is the way to go for this, but it is a lot of fun to talk about. You know what I mean? It's just like, what's the real difference between like 30 and 40 as opposed to like 1 versus 10?
it's the way to go to get me yelled at on Twitter for like 3 weeks because people think because my name's in the byline that it's just my rankings.
Yeah, I got to make sure that our podcast audience understands this because, man, Tom really, he takes it. He's like sitting there drawing the sword as the enemy, like, is attacking. You really are a brave man out here in these Twitter streets to be the person with their name on the byline.
Hashtag mute and move on.
Yeah, exactly. Coming up on the other side, we've got a new commissioner in the Pac-12 and we had some thrilling twists and turns and a finish in the Division I national championship over the weekend. We'll get into that and the 5 coaches to keep an eye on when the coach rankings are released on Tuesday and Wednesday next. The Pac-12, when they hired Larry Scott was coming from USTA. It's going to be an outside the box hire. This is going to be a way to really modernize and move forward. And the commissioner search to replace him at one point involved a co-commissioner pitch, which, I didn't feel like that was going to be the best play, but sure enough, at the end of last week, the Pac-12 does end up making the news official. It is going to be George Kliavkov, a 54-year-old coming in from MGM, a lot of startup experience. I was trying to get his pronunciation right. And thankfully, when you're like, big investment startup guy, there's a lot of videos of you on YouTube, like pitching virtual reality. So I got to hear him actually say his name as one of his companies from a few years ago was a part of it. So he was the president of entertainment and sports for MGM Resorts International. He takes over beginning a 5-year contract on July 1, unanimous support from the Pac-12's presidents and chancellors. So when in his press conference, the big takeaways, I think, were number one, acknowledging the struggles in the revenue sports in men's basketball and in football. And in number two, being all in on the idea of college football playoff expansion. Shocker. So what's the thought? Because, on paper, you could say you just tried to make another outside the box hire. We were excited about Larry Scott. It didn't work out. What suggests that this might work out a little bit better where, the ACC just makes an athletic director or commissioner. That's a traditional conference commissioner hire. What do we think of George Kliavkov taking over in the Pac-12?
It's one of those situations. He's got enough experience in what he's done at his previous jobs where I think this is a hire with the TV deal in mind more than anything. Trying to make sure that they get the best deal they can for the television and the distribution of their network and just for their games to help increase the revenue going to the sport. And I think that he's definitely got the experience and the understanding and the contacts that industry to help the Pac-12 do that, at least maximize what the Pac-12 can get. As far as everything else, it's kind of one of those situations, just like, I don't know, we'll wait and see, because like you said, this is an outside the box hire. There is no real experience in the, athletic department kind of academia part of the world and doing that. And we have seen, like with Larry Scott, that backfired. We kind of saw with the Big Ten at the early start. Of course, Kevin Warren got thrown into a really crappy situation in that, hey, welcome to the job. Here's a pandemic, figure it out. But you've seen problems there with communication between that and the school. So there's probably going to be kind of a rough patch kind of start trying to get acclimated to the world. And I don't want to jump out too much, but my concern overall is just the background that he has. Like, obviously, he comes in and says, we need to expand the playoff. Well, of course, the Pac-12 is going to feel that way. The Pac-12 is one of the conferences that is continuously left out. So, of course, they're going to be all 100% on board with the idea of expansion. It's just, when somebody comes from like that Vegas kind of casino background, entertainment background, I worry about them thinking about what they need to do too much about to get new people involved and a lot less concerned about the people that they already do have involved. And then I sometimes worry about what that means for the actual sport. Like we're seeing it in baseball with Rob Manfred, where he's far more concerned with fixing what the perceived things that are wrong with the sport than just selling what he has.
I think this is a hire that is very reflective of Larry Scott, right? Larry Scott did some decent things as commissioner, but overall his tenure is going to be viewed as a failure because the Pac-12 had, I think we would agree, probably by far the most ambitious plan as far as marketing their rights. They ran their own TV network exclusively, and just straight up, Larry Scott was not a good TV executive for them. Like that was not something that he had the right kind of experience for, and it was a little bit weird that they tried to launch what they did, given what his background was. So I think, do you guys recall when the Pac-12 was kind of out there with this weird idea of going with co-commissioners?
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were going to get somebody who had serious TV executive experience, which this guy does, and then somebody who probably has some experience on the athletic director side. So maybe they'll still hire somebody maybe as his number two, who is very much sort of the school liaison, and allow him to look big picture for TV stuff. But I think that's why they went with this.
Yeah, I totally, Bud, I think you make a great point, because I think most people are like, co-commissioners, what are you guys doing? Like, you're really going to screw this up? Like, this is the dumbest idea you've ever heard. But why even announce to people what you're thinking about doing if you're going to do that? Why not just have a number two, a vice chair, or whatever you want to call it, that would assist? Because clearly money, revenue should be the Pac-12's number one priority. Like, you want to fix your problems, pour a bunch of money into them. Although don't do it with an office in San Francisco, right? Like, let's get out of that lease, which they had. But I think because it does make sense. Like, if his background is media and he's got a history with dealing with Major League Baseball and the NBA and some other professional sports leagues, like, that's great. Like, he's got connections at the TV companies and he can negotiate this deal. But a lot of these TV contracts are 10 years. What do you do the day after that is inked? Can I sign up for that deal? Yeah. I mean, it feels like, some of these agents in our business that take commission off the length of the deal must be a pretty sweet gig, because then you never hear from them from another 5 years or however long it is. They just do the deal. But I do think he does need somebody with knowledge of the college athletic world and how to do what makes a conference commissioner good. And Larry Scott was not it. But I mean, I think you look at probably the cream of the crop is Sankey and the SEC, and he's done an outstanding job. And there have been some really good ones. I mean, but I think he needs somebody to kind of help him navigate that. Like, what is my job after I do that? How do I make our conference relevant again? How do I embrace some of these things? And I think one of them, and this is one of the things I was excited about it, with the Vegas connection, being at MGM, already having negotiated and helped put on the men's and women's basketball conference tournaments in the Pac-12 in Las Vegas. Like, to me, boom, get the Pac-12 football championship in Las Vegas, like priority number one. And then maybe embrace gambling unlike any other conference has. And the NCAA might push back on that, but you say, you know what? You guys don't even matter anymore. Like, start to do things and embrace some things differently, because the Pac-12 is in a position where they have to kind of swing for the fences at some point.
I agree that Sankey is a good commissioner. But I also know, he was really set up with the keys to something that was just absolutely humming. And, Mike's Live, one of the major reasons why the SEC has just absolutely taken off is that the last two SEC commissioners got all the other schools to stop ratting each other out for the most part. Like, we have had unprecedented labor peace basically in the SEC, especially amongst the big boys, right? We've seen some of the smaller players get hit with some sanctions, but the ones that are the true money makers who can get to the playoff, who can win playoff games, they don't really get hit with any kind of violations at all. And I think a lot of that was the previous commissioners telling these guys, hey, don't handle your business in-house.
And we keep family things in the family.
And maybe the ACC would have gone TV exec had Phillips, right? Sorry.
Yeah, Jim Phillips.
Excuse me. Had he not been available, but most everybody who I know thought that the Big Ten was going to hire Phillips, and they thought it was like a no-brainer that the Big Ten would hire him. And then they went really outside the box, I guess. And so the ACC was like, well, it's almost like when you're in a fantasy draft and somebody, passes on Mike Trout, and you're like, okay, all right, well, if I have to, I'll go ahead and take him.
When Ronald Acuna falls to you at number 7, and you're like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, if I have to.
I mean, if you're gonna make me, sure. Because I thought that the example of the pandemic, this was as the search for the ACC commissioner was ongoing, I said that the disunion that we saw, even like, within the Big Ten, and presidents and athletic directors not being on the same page, that having somebody that had been in those rooms, on those conference calls, and understands the delicate line you have to toe between the media rights part, the athletic directors, and then the university side. That's why I kind of thought the Jim Phillips hire by the ACC was like, okay, well, you're getting somebody who's been in that, and he's done it at Northwestern, which means he's had to really balance the academic side with the athletic side. He's overseen a lot of expansion, and he's got this was something he mentioned on a call with reporters on Thursday. He was in there from the start with the Big Ten network. He saw exactly how things grow, and that's all experience that I thought that. Because we couldn't see the Big Ten get on the same page, and we saw the SEC seemed to be all moving in the same direction, hand in hand, ACC all moving in the same direction, hand in hand. It definitely revealed how we cannot predict a pandemic, but there will be challenges that conference commissioners need to face, where part of effective leadership is just going to get everybody to agree with each other. But I had not thought about the SEC just stopping to ratting out on each other. And I don't know why I didn't, because it's true, I'm guessing. And it's also like hilarious, but also very, very impactful. Right. I mean,
look at the 70s and 80s.
Like, am I being 90s. Naive? Okay. Yeah. So that
the SEC was constantly turning each other in for stuff. And you'd be like, oh, damn it. Like, if we could only get our stuff together, and our best program wouldn't go on probation for 8 years. Like, and then all of a sudden mid-90s, kind of especially late 90s, everything just they started being quiet. By the way, isn't MGM the official gaming partner of the NBA? Like, I like that in this guy's background. I also liked that he was part of the MLB Advanced Media deal, which, if you guys are familiar with that sale, they were so far out ahead of everybody else as far as their tech, getting off platform tech going. Like, that was absolutely huge. And so I do think that his TV experience matters here, but experience in a variety of broadcast mediums is, and especially some of the newer emerging markets, is key.
Also, I could be wrong here, but I think during his introductory press conference, because this was something I was definitely on the lookout for, he never said the word disrupt. And that was my biggest fear with the Pac-12.
I do think it's interesting, though, because the Pac-12 clearly has its issues, and we're all panning this higher, and a lot of people have and talked about it, and we're dissecting it. And he says, hey, we want to make football and men's basketball a priority. We want to get good again. We want to do these things. And it's like, all right, well, how? And we could almost do a whole podcast on like, how are you going to fix the Pac-12? Because I'd be curious to hear your guys' ideas. And maybe it is a separate podcast, but it's a massive task to take on. And like, how do you, it's going to take time. Like, it's not like all of a sudden he's going to get hired and yay, USC or Oregon's going to win the Pac-12 and get in the playoff. There's literally nothing he can do in the near term that's going to ensure they have that success. I mean, I think the one thing that did bother me about Larry Scott, I never heard from him get vocal or irritated. Or I remember the first 2 years they got left out of the playoff, he's like, well, we have a system in place and they judge the final 4 teams. And if you're not one of those, I'm like, you should be banging the table for expansion right now. Even if you don't really mean it or believe in it, you should be making the case for your conference needs to be a part of this. And that was very frustrating to watch. So I think that's an interesting discussion of what do you do to fix the Pac-12.
Add it to the ideas tab on the planning doc, Danny.
You just gave summer pods. Here we come.
You just gave us, because that is, yeah. I mean, in my head, I was just starting to like run through an entire list, but I want to give it some more thought, because if we can just sit down and pitch some ideas on how to fix the Pac-12, that would, it's George Kliavkov's challenge right now. He's having those same discussions. He's having those same, he's going to do the SWOT analysis with everybody on the staff. He's going to have the no bad ideas whiteboard out there. So maybe we'll have our own little group, consulting company. We'll see. Okay. We'll tack it on. Over the weekend on Sunday, Sam Houston, South Dakota State, the FCS National Championship. I did like the branding of it. the NCAA and all the logos, calling it the Division I championship, which is true, but I guess Alabama can kick rocks. We're all about Sam Houston here at the NCAA. It was a wild game. So there was total downpour in Frisco, Texas, right as the game is beginning. South Dakota State star quarterback Mark Gronowski, the conference offensive player of the year, on the very first drive of the game. He's on a quarterback run, kind of lands funny as he gets tackled. He's knocked out of the game with a knee injury. So South Dakota State's offense takes a huge hit. And then Sam Houston has a fumbled snap out of shotgun, then a fumbled snap on a punt, both leading to easy short fields. But on the second time, South Dakota State can't move the ball in this pouring rain. They try to kick a field goal. They can't handle the snap. I mean, this was just all bananas. Then finally, a lightning delay comes, an hour and 11 minutes. And when they come back, it clears up and the game takes off. 3 lead changes over the course of the final 2.5 quarters. They go no halftime, which,
3 minutes.
3-minute halftime. So Sam Houston finishes the second quarter strong, starts the third quarter strong, and just gains a lot of momentum. But I mentioned the star quarterback Gronowski being out for South Dakota State. Isaiah Davis running like a man possessed. The running back for the Jackrabbits breaks off a couple of long runs, scores 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. This thing goes back and forth. Sam Houston with the late touchdown, I think 15, 18 seconds remaining when they finally scored it. It is the first national championship in program history for Sam Houston. Sam Houston coach KC Keeler becomes the first coach to win 2 FCS championships at 2 different schools. He did it at his alma mater, Delaware, back in 2003, and then gets it done here with Sam Houston. Sam Houston, remember, under Willie Fritz, made it to the championship game in back-to-back years, 2011, 2012, both times falling to North Dakota State as they started to get off on their run. There was, just a very cool Jaquez Ezzard transfer from Howard, had a huge game and sort of changed the whole dynamic of the way that South Dakota State had to defend the Sam Houston offense. But I thought that it was a very thrilling completion to the Division I college football season. Curious if you guys got any eyes on it or if you guys had any thoughts on the Bearcats and the Jackrabbits.
I thought it was awesome. I went to Naples this weekend, had a road trip. My daughter was in a golf tournament.
Oh, where'd you play?
Royal Palm Golf Club.
Okay.
Nice little course. They had a beautiful practice facility. So her round finished up at 1. It's about a 2-hour drive. So I was anticipating getting home in time for the second half, maybe the fourth quarter even, just kind of taking our time, and I'd get there for the good stuff, right? And get there. So I get home and I flip on the game and it's like mid-second quarter. I'm like, what? I'm like, oh, another long 5. Here we go. College football needs to speed up the pace. And then I start watching and I'm, they had a rain delay. So I'm figuring all this out. And then the game just kind of took over and it was fun. It was a little bit wonky. Players are slipping all over the place. Grinnell, you have backup quarterbacks playing. My overall takeaway, you guys tell me if you watch the game, and I don't know if it was because the videos they kept showing of it, but do they not care about protecting the quarterback at the FCS level?
Crush.
Because Eric Schmidt was I thought I was watching Danny Warfel on the other side, because when I was at Florida State, I used to watch our defense just light him up and was like, ooh, that's tough. Today's game, it just felt like the refs were like, let him play. And he was a free for all. I mean, that dude, for the performance he had, shout out to him, because that was phenomenal. And he kept getting back up and kept making incredible runs. He had 3 touchdown passes, the game-winning all of it I thought was phenomenal. I'll remember that kid for a long time for that performance.
Did you hear the report that he was spitting up blood on the sideline?
Yes. It's unbelievable. And he's getting drilled. He's coming down on his shoulder and they're sandwiching him in well beyond what is acceptable in today's NFL. And I'm old school. I'm all about letting them get hit and stuff. But I was I guess they just don't have that rule at the FCS level.
Do you remember
at 180? He is listed at 180 at 6'2", and he was getting pounded. Sorry, bud.
Do you remember what Mickey Andrews said about hitting Warfel?
Was it the echo of the whistle?
Echo of the whistle.
Bobby? Yeah,
Play to the echo of the whistle.
Yeah. And there's no doubt they did too.
Yeah, I think it was like sort of the idea that because Schmidt is a dual threat quarterback, the refs have just decided he's a runner. Like at all times, fair game. You can hit him however. Okay. So Tuesday, we will get the coach rankings 65 through 26. Wednesday, the top 25. Remember, these are all of the Power 5 coaches. Tom writes the story. We all have voted in this process. Tom is the only one who has seen the results. So Tom, as a nice little tease for our listeners, and on Wednesday, we will be back reacting to the total composite list. And maybe we can even like send it out ahead of time so everybody can prepare their takes. But obviously, according to company policy, it will be marked as confidential. Tom, who are some of the names that stood out to you that you think are going to generate some interesting discussion among the fans when they see where they are ranked?
Well, I'm going to name them in alphabetical order as to not to tip our hand as to where they are ranked. But one of the cases I think is interesting, at least to me, I don't know how interesting it'll be to everybody, but for me, going to what we were talking about earlier with how you try to figure out how you view a coach, this is a case where it's like recency bias definitely plays, because Brett Bielema, if you look at his time at Wisconsin and Arkansas, I was interested in seeing where he would rank now that he's come back and he's taking over a job at Illinois, which isn't really considered, a top Power 5 job. Because if you look at his success when he was at Wisconsin, he won 3 Big Ten conference titles in a row. He went to 3 Rose Bowls. At Arkansas, he had their last winning season in the SEC, and although the last season there was poor, he went 1-7. He won more games at Arkansas in his 4 years there than they have total. He won 3 times as many conference games in those 4 years as they've won since they fired him and he left. But he's been gone doing the assistant thing at the NFL level. So it's going to be interesting to me to see where he stacked up compared to other coaches who probably haven't accomplished nearly as much, but are just kind of fresher names. And I think that'll be interesting when the rankings come out. Clay Helton, I think, will stir up some debate as far as where he's finished.
Where you got him? 65?
I cannot. I cannot.
No, I'm saying your personal vote. You could tell us yours. We know where you stand.
I will say that aside from the 3 new coaches, well, no, I'll just say there aren't many coaches ranked lower than Clay Helton.
Yikes!
On my rankings.
I got Clay Helton at 42, and I know it's too high. But that's where it landed,
57 here.
I group them by tens. I go in, I do the top 10 and then I list a whole bunch of 20s and a whole bunch of 30s and a whole bunch of 40s. And because I'm a nice guy, I don't even get to 50s. And so I have to turn 40s into 50s. Clay Helton, nice guy. Bielema, by the way, I got him at 26. I'm clearly just blinded by the Wisconsin success for sure.
Yeah, I kind of discount the Wisconsin success a little bit. Basically, everybody who's followed the Barry Alvarez blueprint, there's a lot of people in the industry who think, as long, you could stick a lot of dudes in there who have the exact same success if you follow the Alvarez blueprint. Like that's what Tennessee was trying to do allegedly with Fulmer, right? That was kind of his pitch as an AD. Some people in the industry were thinking. And at Arkansas, he probably did a better job at Arkansas than I give him credit for. But I basically everybody who's followed that blueprint, that Alvarez sits out wins the exact same thing that Alvarez did, right?
So
pretty much.
Yeah. Different.
Or excuse me, that Bielema did.
I think if I'm going to rank Wisconsin coaches, I think I'd have Chris ahead of Bielema.
Yeah. So my other concern with Bielema is, can he win with lesser players? Because
Illinois is Illinois noticeably less talented than even like his Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say at this point, yeah.
I mean, yeah, I guess when I start thinking about the running backs and I'm like, well, there you go. I mean, multiple NFL player after NFL player for sure.
I guess like trying to play bully ball if you have a bottom 3 roster in the SEC West against people who are going to have really good defensive linemen, who are going to have enough of them they can sub out. I don't know. We'll see. I could very well be very wrong on Bielema.
Do you know who currently has the highest rated recruiting class in 2022 in the Big Ten West?
I believe there was a group text on that.
Yeah. Is it still? I was on vacation a couple days.
Still Illinois. It's Ohio State, Penn State, Rutgers, Michigan, Maryland, all in the East, and then at number 6, Illinois.
Wow.
So Bielema, Clay Helton, who else?
The next name on the list, I think, is going to be interesting just to see the reaction to, because it's always interesting to see the reaction to it. Jim Harbaugh. It's been somewhat of a roller coaster in our coach rankings the next few years, and where he finishes this year might raise a few eyebrows.
He has been as high as like 6 or 7, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he won't be 6 or 7 this year.
No, I can safely say that he is not 6 or 7 this year.
I had him at 32.
Wow. All right.
I don't know if that's high. I don't know if that's low. It's right there in the middle.
Am I the low man on him?
Where'd you have him?
42.
Wow.
I would say you're probably going to be the low man on him. Yes.
Okay.
Jeez.
I mean, and that's the thing is like, can you name 41 coaches better than Jim Harbaugh? No, but you can probably name 25, 26, right? Definitively better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Jim.
I don't know, man. I think Harbaugh's at the time now where you buy. Like, I think it's buy low time on Harbaugh. Like, everybody's ready. He still had 3 10-win seasons, and the other one was a 9. He's had some pretty good success, and I think you have to throw out this past year. I think this year is massive for him, but I just think you can't. And that's another interesting aspect of this whole discussion is what do you do with a COVID year? Because a lot of programs imploded. But I don't know. I think you guys are being too hard on Harbaugh.
Twice.
I can't.
Go ahead.
I can't give away where he's ranked, obviously. But what's interesting to me is not so much the number next to his name, as much as a couple of coaches that are directly ahead of him on the rankings. Where I'm like, it's interesting situations that I'm sure we'll get into on Wednesday.
Michigan fans are going to see it, and just like the immediate association of who is right ahead of you is going to drive them crazy, is what it sounds like. They're going to say that Jim Harbaugh took the Wolverines into the final game of the regular season twice with the chance to win the Big Ten East and play for a Big Ten championship. Twice he has been there in the final week with a shot. Like, that's all you want, right? You just want to be able to have a shot to win the championship. The issue becomes what happened in that last game of the season and how far it has made it seem from actually being in championship contention.
Mm-hmm. Next coach that I think will be interesting is Matt Campbell, because that is definitely one of those kind of, well, what are you ranking him based on? But he's
going to be so high. It's going to be off the charts.
I got him at 11.
We're at peak Matt Campbell season right now.
I'm higher. Iowa State fans, I want you to know, since you guys blow up my Twitter every day, I am higher on Matt Campbell than Chip Patterson is. I got him 9.
There you go. He will be he will be stock soaring right now. All right, and then
should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally, the last name that I think will call it Mike Leach. Won't give it away. Just you see some of the names that are surrounding him on both above and below, and you're just kind of like, that's interesting.
In our pre-talk, when we were just talking at the beginning of this podcast, when we were talking about coaches, interesting. I had Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach, kind of similar to the discussion we had based on our mailbag not that long ago. I thought these two I'll be intrigued to see where these two coaches come out. And it kind of goes back to the personality thing. Like, I think they've benefited from their personalities in some cases. Some people hate it, but I think they definitely have lifted their profile as coaches because they're both out there in different ways.
So I think that I am biased against Mike Leach because I'm just sick of it. I'm just tired of the shtick. I was here in
Pirate.
Yeah, I was living that blog life, back in 2010, like after he gets over the the lawsuit with Texas Tech and the swing your sword and all our different rants. It's like, Washington, watch. It's all caps. Watch. Washington State coach Mike Leach gives epic rant on blank. And it was just like a Mad Lib. He would just go on a rant and you'd write about it and everybody say, oh, look at the quirky little coach, blah, blah, blah. And it got some attention and then it ran out and now he does it. And those of us who've been following Mike Leach trying to create viral moments for more than a decade, I'm just exhausted. I just don't think it's funny anymore. I am being unfair to somebody who has found ways to win double-digit games in Lubbock, Texas, and Pullman, Washington, and I am docking him because I am tired of these epic rants at your press conferences. 48.
Let us have our own epic rants. You stay out of it, Leach.
Yeah, come on.
Did anybody have him top half?
I have him
top half, by the way, 60, top 65. Or excuse me, like top 32, 33. Yeah.
I have him pretty much right on the cusp.
Same. Yeah. I think the guys are a good football coach at taking programs that are under-resourced and getting them to bowl games consistently.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not a good recruiter, and there's certain guys who probably don't want to play for that. But if you are a program that is consistently set up to have the worst roster in your division, a lot of the time, Washington State, old Texas Tech, Mississippi State, not a bad guy to have. He can probably get you to bowl games.
It's absolutely a fair assessment. I'm acknowledging that. I'm just a little bit biased. Come at me, Klanga. Let's go. So keep your eyes peeled. Again, Tuesday, it will be 65 through 26, released on cbssports.com. Wednesday, 1 through 25, all Power 5 coaches ranked. Tom Fornelli has put in all the work to compile the results and write it up for the site. And on Wednesday, we will be reacting to the full 1 through 65 list. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fornelli. You can follow him at Danny Cannell. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.